It is very difficult to break through. I mean, that's part of the argument. I think that people who say defund the police or dismantle police or abolish police are making the case that that an institution that has over the course of, I mean, I would defy anyone to say that over the course of the history of American policing, it hasn't operated in a racialized way, influenced by bias. I would love to hear someone point out for me an era in which American policing was not tainted in that regard. And so then a lot of people say, well, it's actually, if the institution is so poisoned, that's why we don't buy into a reform argument. That's why we think we need to have something entirely different. And so it's a huge challenge. But I think that you can even use the example, sort of a little known story about New York City policing is, and I bring this back to Eric Garner. When Eric Garner was choked and died, everyone remembered him saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. But if you watch that video, before he said that, one of the things that he said to the 4 or 5 police officers that were around him is like, why are you always stopping me? Why are you always harassing me? Every day this happens. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. What can urge police leaders to do is to dramatically reduce the degree to which they are using what I'll describe as sort of negative interventions, enforcement, whether they're criminal summons or stop and frisk,
right,
or violations or arrests for misdemeanor things that probably shouldn't even be criminalized. And we actually have seen some progress in New York City. Think about stop and frisk. It went from a high of 700,000 stop and frisks a year to about 25,000, no cost to public safety, probably much benefit to the young people who were not being stopped, who didn't have to internalize that trauma, and benefit to the police because it stopped delegitimizing them in the eyes of the people who were being stopped all the time. But we've also seen in the city a reduction in summonses. This is over a decade of time. Criminal summonses, in misdemeanor arrests, and in felony arrests. And I think that that is the right thing. I come back to this figure of 11 million arrests a year. Sometimes people think, well, okay, I get it. Very dangerous country, a lot of violent criminals who are out there. But if I were to tell you the truth of that 11 million, only 5% of those are for violent offenses. 8% of that number is for nuisance, public order, low-level drug crimes. And so the police are sweeping into the criminal legal system a bunch of conduct that isn't necessarily, it's over-criminalized. It may not be merited in terms of arrest. So I think that that if you think about it that way, that is a good example of what
one of the reforms could be,
or what a jurisdiction can do, is say, look, we want to figure out how to reduce the negative interactions, and we know that they actually aren't productive of public safety.